The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the streetlights, but inside the Harper family's cramped apartment, the air was thick with dread. Ezra and Elias Harper, 18-year-old twins, stood shoulder to shoulder in the living room, their hearts pounding like war drums. They'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, but no amount of practice could dull the terror of telling their parents they were both gay. Ezra, the quieter one with dark, tousled hair and a habit of fidgeting with his glasses, glanced at Elias, whose buzz-cut and bold stance radiated defiance. They'd always been two sides of a coin, Ezra the dreamer, Elias the fighter, but tonight, they were united, their hands brushing for courage. Their mother, Diane, sat on the sagging couch, her face a mask of exhaustion from her double shift at the hospital. Their father, Tom, leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, eyes already narrowing with suspicion. "Mom, Dad," Elias began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "We need to tell you something. We're both gay." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, sharp and final. Ezra's breath hitched, waiting for the fall. Diane's eyes widened, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. Tom's face darkened, his jaw tightening. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "We're gay," Ezra repeated, softer but no less firm, his fingers curling into fists to stop the shaking. "We've known for a while. We didn't want to hide it anymore." The room exploded into chaos. Tom's voice boomed, a tirade of disbelief and anger, words like disgrace and choice slicing through the air. Diane's silence was worse, her eyes darting between her sons as if they were strangers. Elias stood his ground, firing back, his voice rising to match his father's, while Ezra shrank, his heart splintering with every shout. Then came the moment that would haunt them. Diane stood, tears streaming down her face, and crossed the room to Elias. She pulled him into a fierce hug, whispering, "I love you, no matter what." Ezra's relief was fleeting, until he saw his father's hand on a black trash bag, stuffing it with Ezra's clothes from the hall closet. "You?" Tom spat, thrusting the bag at Ezra. "Get out. I won't have this in my house." Ezra froze, the weight of the bag in his hands heavier than the world. Elias lunged forward, shouting, "You can't do this. He's your son." But Tom's face was stone. Diane's sobs filled the silence, but she didn't move to stop it. Ezra's vision blurred with tears as he stumbled out into the rain, the door slamming behind him. The Seattle night swallowed him whole, the trash bag slung over his shoulder like a badge of rejection. He wandered, numb, past neon signs and strangers' faces, until he found himself at a 24-hour diner on Pike Street. The waitress, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Marla, slid a coffee across the counter without a word. Ezra clutched the mug, its warmth the only anchor in his unraveling world. Meanwhile, Elias sat on the apartment floor, his mother's arms still around him, but his mind was with Ezra. He'd always been the protector, the one who punched bullies in middle school when they mocked Ezra's quiet ways. Now he felt helpless, his twin out there alone. He pulled out his phone, texting Ezra, "Where are you? I'm coming." Ezra's reply was a single word, "Diner." By the time Elias arrived, the rain had soaked him through, but he didn't care. He found Ezra in a booth, staring into his coffee like it held answers. Elias slid in across from him, their knees bumping under the table. "We'll figure this out," Elias said, his voice fierce with conviction. "Together." Ezra nodded, but his eyes were hollow. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why did Mom hug you, and Dad, why did he choose me to throw out?" Elias had no answer, only a burning resolve to make this right. They were twins, bound by something deeper than blood, and no trash bag or angry father could break that. The diner's neon glow flickered as Marla refilled Ezra's coffee, her glance lingering on the brothers. "You boys need a place to crash?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "I got a friend who runs a shelter. No questions asked." Ezra hesitated, but Elias nodded. "Yeah, we do." Marla scribbled an address on a napkin, sliding it over with a small smile. "You're not alone, you hear me?" The shelter was a converted warehouse in Capitol Hill, a haven for kids like them. Cast out, misunderstood, but still fighting. The director, a trans woman named Riley with a warm laugh and sharp eyes, welcomed them without judgment. She handed Ezra a clean towel and pointed them to a bunk room. "You're safe here," she said, "but you've got to decide what's next." That night, as they lay in side-by-side cots, Elias reached across the gap, his hand finding Ezra's. "We're gonna be okay," he whispered. "I promise." Ezra squeezed back, but the weight of the trash bag still pressed on his chest. He didn't know what okay meant anymore, but with Elias beside him, he dared to hope. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the shelter's high windows, casting golden patches on the concrete floor. Ezra woke to the sound of Elias arguing with someone on the phone. Diane? Their mother. "You let him do this, Mom," Elias snapped. "You didn't stop him." Ezra sat up, his heart racing. He didn't want Elias to lose their mother too. But the betrayal stung. Why had she chosen Elias to embrace, leaving him to face their father's wrath? Riley appeared, her presence calming. "You two got plans?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Because the world out there's tough, but it's also full of people who'll love you for who you are." Elias looked at Ezra, his eyes fierce. "We're sticking together," he said. "No matter what." Ezra nodded, a spark of determination igniting in his chest. They were twins, after all, two halves of a whole, and no one could take that from them. But as they stepped into the uncertain future, the question lingered. Could they rebuild a family that had fractured so brutally, or would they have to forge a new one from the ashes? The shelter's common room buzzed with the low hum of voices, a mix of laughter and quiet despair. Ezra sat at a chipped wooden table, sketching in a borrowed notebook, his pencil tracing the outline of a tree. Something solid, rooted, unlike the chaos of his life. Elias paced nearby, his phone pressed to his ear, trying to reach a cousin in Portland who might take them in. The rejection from their father still burned, but Ezra felt a flicker of hope in this strange new world of outcasts who understood. Riley, the shelter's director, dropped into a chair across from Ezra, her silver hoop earrings catching the light. "You're good with that pencil," she said, nodding at his sketch. "Ever think about art school?" Ezra blushed, pushing his glasses up. "Never had the chance to think that far." "You've got time," Riley said, her voice firm but kind. "You're 18. The world's not done with you yet." Elias ended his call with a frustrated sigh, slumping beside Ezra. "Cousin Nate says he's got no room." Big surprise. He ran a hand over his buzz cut, his jaw tight. "We need a plan, Easy. We can't stay here forever." Ezra's pencil stilled. He wanted to believe in Elias's fire, but the memory of the trash bag, his own clothes, his own life, discarded, made him feel like he was nothing. "What if Dad's right?" he whispered. "What if we're wrong?" Elias's eyes flashed. "Don't you dare say that. Dad's the one who's wrong. He's the one who threw you out like garbage." The word garbage hit Ezra like a slap, but before he could respond, a new voice cut through the room. "Yo, you two brooding twins need a break?" It was Jamie, a 20-year-old non-binary kid with a shock of blue hair and a grin that could disarm anyone. They'd been at the shelter a week, kicked out by their own family in Tacoma. Jamie plopped down, tossing a deck of cards on the table. "Play around with me. Loser does dish duty." Ezra hesitated, but Elias grabbed the cards, shuffling with a smirk. "You're on." The game was a distraction, a small rebellion against the weight of their reality. Jamie's laughter was infectious, and for the first time in days, Ezra felt his shoulders loosen. But the reprieve was short-lived. That afternoon, Diane showed up at the shelter, her face pale and drawn. "Elias," she said, her voice breaking as she stood in the doorway. "Ezra, I am so sorry." Ezra's heart leapt, then sank. He wanted to run to her, to feel her arms around him like she'd hugged Elias, but the memory of her silence held him back. Elias stood, his fists clenched. "Why are you here, Mom?" "To apologize for letting Dad kick Ezra out." Diane flinched, tears spilling over. "I didn't know what to do. Your father, he's so angry. I thought I could calm him down, but I was wrong." "Wrong," Elias snapped. "You stood there while he threw Ezra's life in a trash bag." Ezra touched Elias's arm, his voice soft. "Let her talk." Diane's hands trembled as she spoke. "I want you both home. I'll talk to your father. I'll make this right." But Ezra saw the doubt in her eyes, the same doubt he felt. Could she really stand up to Tom? Or would she fold again, leaving Ezra to pay the price? Riley, who'd been watching from a distance, stepped in. "Diane, these boys need more than promises. They need safety. Can you guarantee that?" Diane's silence was answer enough. Elias shook his head, grabbing Ezra's hand. "We're not going back until Dad changes. And maybe not even then." That night, Ezra couldn't sleep. He kept seeing his mother's face, torn between love and fear. He slipped out of bed and found Jamie in the common room, strumming a battered guitar. "Can't sleep either?" Jamie asked, their voice soft. Ezra shook his head, sitting beside them. "I keep thinking, what if I'd stayed quiet? Maybe Dad wouldn't have." "Stop," Jamie said, their tone sharp but kind. "You don't get to blame yourself for his hate. You and Elias, you're brave. Braver than I was when I came out." Ezra's throat tightened. "I don't feel brave." Jamie smiled, plucking a gentle chord. "You will. Give it time." The next day, Elias found a flyer for a local LGBTQ plus youth group pinned to the shelter's bulletin board. "This could be something," he said, showing it to Ezra. The group met at a community center in Fremont, offering support, job leads, and a chance to connect. Ezra was skeptical, but Elias's enthusiasm was contagious. At the meeting, they met Aisha, a 22-year-old black trans woman who ran the group with a quiet strength. She welcomed them with open arms, her voice warm as she shared her own story of being disowned and rebuilding. "You're not alone," she told them, echoing Marla's words from the diner. "This is your family now, if you want it." Ezra felt a spark of something new, hope, maybe, or the beginning of belonging. But as he looked at Elias, he saw the fire in his brother's eyes, the determination to fight for more than just survival. They were twins, bound by a shared past and a shared pain, but their paths were diverging. Elias wanted to confront their father, to demand acceptance. Ezra wasn't sure he could face that fight, not yet. As they left the meeting, a cold wind swept through Fremont, carrying the promise of winter. Ezra pulled his jacket tighter, the trash bag's weight still lingering in his mind. But with Elias beside him, and a new community forming around them, he felt the first stirrings of a strength he didn't know he had. The Fremont Community Center became a lifeline, a place where Ezra and Elias could breathe without fear. The youth group meetings, held twice a week in a cozy room filled with mismatched chairs and colorful posters, offered a sense of belonging that Ezra hadn't realized he craved. Aisha, the group's leader, had a way of making everyone feel seen, her laughter a balm for their wounds. But even in this safe haven, Ezra felt the shadow of his father's rejection, a bruise that wouldn't fade. Elias, on the other hand, was all fire. He threw himself into the group, volunteering to help with outreach, his voice loud and unapologetic as he shared their story. "Our dad kicked Ezra out," he told the group one evening, his arm slung protectively around his twin. "But we're not letting him win." Ezra managed a small smile, but inside, he was unraveling. He admired Elias's strength, his refusal to bow, but he couldn't shake the question that gnawed at him. Why me? Why was I the one Dad threw away? After the meeting, Aisha pulled Ezra aside, her dark eyes searching his. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Ezra hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of his notebook, now filled with sketches of trees, faces, and fleeting moments from the shelter. I don't know how to move forward. Elias is so sure of everything, but I feel stuck." Aisha nodded, her expression soft but unflinching. "You're carrying a lot, Ezra. It's okay to feel stuck, but you've got to let yourself grieve before you can heal." Her words stayed with him as he and Elias walked back to the shelter, the Seattle skyline glittering in the distance. Elias was talking about a job lead Aisha had mentioned, a barista gig at a queer-friendly cafe in Capitol Hill. "We could both apply," he said, his voice bright with possibility. "Get out of the shelter. Get our own place." Ezra nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept seeing his mother's face, her tearful apology, and his father's cold eyes. He wanted to believe in Elias's vision of a new life, but the trash bag felt like a chain around his heart. The next day, they visited the cafe, a cozy spot called Rainbow Brew with pride flags in the windows and a chalkboard menu covered in doodles. The manager, a 30-year-old gay man named Carlos with a warm smile and a sleeve of tattoos, interviewed them on the spot. "You two got grit," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I like that. You're hired. Both of you." Ezra felt a rush of relief, but it was tempered by fear. Could he really start over? Could he be someone other than the boy with the trash bag? Their first shift was chaotic, a blur of steaming milk and customer orders, but Carlos was patient, guiding them with a mix of humor and firmness. Elias thrived, charming customers with his quick wit, while Ezra found comfort in the rhythm of the espresso machine, the hiss and grind a kind of meditation. After work, they sat on a bench outside the cafe, sharing a leftover croissant. Elias nudged Ezra's shoulder. "See? We're doing this. We're building something." Ezra smiled, but his eyes drifted to a family passing by. A mother, a father, 2 kids laughing over ice cream cones. He wondered if he'd ever feel that kind of normal again. That night, back at the shelter, Ezra found a letter slipped under their bunk. It was from Diane, her handwriting shaky but clear. "I'm trying to talk to your father," she wrote. "I know I failed you, Ezra. I'm so sorry. Please don't give up on me." Ezra's chest tightened. He wanted to believe her, but trust was a fragile thing, and his was shattered. He showed the letter to Elias, who read it with a scowl. "She's got to do better than words," Elias said, crumpling the paper. "She let this happen." But Ezra smoothed the letter out, tucking it into his notebook. He wasn't ready to forgive, but he wasn't ready to let go either. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. They worked long shifts at Rainbow Brew, saving every penny for a deposit on a tiny studio apartment. Aisha connected them with a local artist, a queer woman named Lena who offered Ezra mentorship for his sketches. "You've got a gift," Lena told him, her voice warm as she studied his drawings. "Don't hide it." Ezra began to feel the stirrings of a new identity, one not defined by rejection. But Elias was restless, his anger at their father growing sharper. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Elias announced, "I'm going to confront Dad. He needs to know what he's done." Ezra's stomach dropped. What if it makes things worse? "It can't get worse," Elias said, his voice hard. "He threw you out, easy. He doesn't get to just move on." Ezra wanted to argue, to beg Elias to stay safe. But he saw the fire in his brother's eyes and knew there was no stopping him. The next morning, Elias left for their parents' apartment, his jaw set, his heart a storm. Ezra stayed behind, sketching furiously, each line a prayer that his brother would come back whole. Hours passed with no word. Ezra's phone stayed silent, and the shelter felt emptier without Elias's presence. When the door finally opened, Elias stood there, his face pale, his eyes red. "He didn't even let me in," he said, his voice breaking. "He said we're both dead to him." Ezra pulled Elias into a hug, their foreheads touching, just like in the park that day. They were twins, bound by pain and love, and no matter what their father said, they had each other. But as Ezra held his brother, he felt a new weight settle in his chest. Not just rejection, but the realization that they might never go home again. The studio apartment was a shoebox, barely 300 square feet, with peeling paint and a single window overlooking a noisy alley. But to Ezra and Elias, it was freedom. They moved in a month after starting at Rainbow Brew, their belongings sparse but their hope fierce. Ezra hung a sketch of a tree above their shared mattress, a symbol of roots they were determined to plant. Elias tacked up a pride flag, its colors a quiet rebellion. Life settled into a rhythm: work, youth group, late-night talks over cheap ramen. Ezra's sketches grew bolder, guided by Lena's mentorship, while Elias became a regular at Aisha's meetings, his voice a beacon for other kids navigating rejection. But beneath their progress, a current of pain ran deep. Elias's confrontation with their father had left a scar, and Ezra still carried the weight of Diane's letter, its words a promise he wasn't sure he could trust. One rainy afternoon, as they cleaned tables at Rainbow Brew, Carlos pulled them aside. "There's a community art show next month," he said, his eyes bright. "Lena thinks Ezra's work should be in it. And Elias, they need volunteers to run the event. You in?" Ezra's heart raced. Showing his art felt like exposing his soul, but Lena's encouragement echoed in his mind. "Okay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elias grinned, clapping him on the back. "That's my brother. We're gonna make this city see you." The art show became their focus, a chance to claim space in a world that had tried to erase them. Ezra spent nights sketching, his pencil capturing moments of joy and pain. Elias laughing in the diner, Jamie's guitar, Aisha's warm smile. Elias threw himself into organizing, his energy infectious as he rallied the youth group to help. But the past wasn't done with them. One evening, as they locked up the cafe, Diane appeared, her coat soaked from the rain. "I need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. Ezra's heart pounded, but Elias stepped forward, his body a shield. "You've got 5 minutes," he said, his tone cold. They sat in the empty cafe, the hum of the espresso machine long gone. Diane's hands shook as she spoke. "Your father's gone, boys. He left last week. Said he couldn't handle any of this." Ezra's breath caught. He'd hated his father's anger, but the idea of him gone, truly gone, felt like a different kind of loss. Elias's face was unreadable. "Good," he said finally. "Maybe now you can actually be our mom." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "I want to be. I'm trying. I've been going to therapy, learning about who you are. I want you both home." Ezra wanted to believe her, but the trash bag's weight lingered. "Why didn't you stop him?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why was it me he threw out?" Diane reached for his hand, but he pulled back. "I was scared," she admitted. "I thought I could fix it, keep the peace. But I failed you, Ezra. I failed you both." Elias stood, his chair scraping the floor. "You don't get to just show up and say sorry. You have to prove it." Diane nodded, her face crumpling. "I will. I swear." She left them with a promise to visit again, to keep trying. Ezra watched her go, torn between hope and fear. Elias squeezed his shoulder. "We don't need them, Easy. We've got each other." But Ezra wasn't so sure. He wanted a mother, a family, even if it was broken. He poured that longing into his art, his sketches for the show becoming a tapestry of their journey. Love, loss, and the fragile hope of something new. The night of the art show arrived, a vibrant chaos of color and sound at the Fremont Community Center. Ezra's pieces hung on a wall, each sketch framed with care by Lena. Elias worked the crowd, his pride in his brother shining brighter than the lights. Aisha, Jamie, and Carlos were there, their presence a reminder of the family they'd found. As Ezra stood by his art, a stranger approached, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, her hair streaked with gray. "Your work," she said, studying a sketch of Elias laughing. "It's so alive. It's like I can feel their story." Ezra's throat tightened. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. For the first time he felt seen, not as the boy with the trash bag, but as someone with something to say. But the night wasn't without its shadows. As the crowd thinned, Ezra spotted Diane in the doorway, clutching a small bouquet of flowers. She approached, her steps hesitant. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice soft. "Both of you." Elias's jaw tightened, but Ezra took the flowers, their petals cool against his fingers. "Thanks, Mom," he said, the word feeling foreign but right. Diane's eyes glistened. Can I come back? Keep trying." Ezra glanced at Elias, who gave a reluctant nod. "One step at a time," Ezra said, his heart cautious but open. As the show ended, Ezra and Elias stood together, the community center emptying around them. They were twins, bound by a shared past and a shared fight. But now they were something more. Survivors, creators, brothers who'd chosen each other over and over again. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Ezra felt like they could walk it together. Months passed, and the studio apartment began to feel like home. Ezra's sketches covered the walls, a gallery of their new life, while Elias's pride flag hung proudly by the window. They worked long shifts at Rainbow Brew, their savings growing slowly but steadily. The youth group remained their anchor, Aisha's laughter and Jamie's guitar a constant in their weeks. But Diane's presence was a new thread, fragile but persistent, weaving itself into their lives. She visited every Sunday, bringing coffee or homemade cookies, her apologies replaced by quiet efforts to understand. She joined a PFLAG group, her questions about their identities clumsy but earnest. Ezra watched her try, his heart softening with each visit, though Elias remained guarded, his trust harder to earn. One evening, as they sat in the apartment eating Diane's slightly burned brownies, she said, "I've been thinking about your father. I don't know if he'll ever come around, but I'm not waiting for him anymore. You two are my family." Ezra's eyes stung, and he reached for her hand, the first time he'd initiated contact since that night in the rain. Elias stayed silent, but his shoulders relaxed, a small sign of thawing. The twins' lives grew fuller. Ezra's art caught the eye of a local gallery owner, who offered him a spot in a group exhibition. Elias started a blog, sharing their story and connecting with other queer youth across the country. Their words, raw and honest, resonated, and soon they were invited to speak at a regional LGBTQ+ conference in Portland. The conference was a whirlwind of voices and stories, a reminder of how far they'd come. Ezra stood on stage, his voice trembling at first, sharing their journey. The trash bag, the shelter, the art show, the slow rebuilding of trust with their mother. Elias followed, his words fierce, calling out the pain of rejection but also the power of chosen family. The crowd's applause was thunderous, and Ezra felt a pride he'd never known. After their talk, a young girl approached, her eyes wide. "My brother's gay," she said, her voice small. "Our parents don't get it. How do I help him?" Ezra knelt to meet her gaze. "Just love him," he said. "Be there no matter what. That's what Elias did for me." Elias squeezed his shoulder, his eyes shining. They were twins, their bond unbreakable. And in that moment, Ezra knew they'd already won. Back in Seattle, spring arrived, painting the city in soft greens and pinks. Diane invited them to a family dinner, not at the old apartment, but at a small house she'd rented in West Seattle, a fresh start. Ezra and Elias arrived together, their hands brushing as they stepped inside. The table was set with care, and Diane's smile was nervous but warm. As they ate, Diane raised her glass. "To my boys," she said, her voice steady. "I'm so proud of who you are." Ezra clinked his glass against hers, his heart full. Elias hesitated, then joined, his expression softening. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. Later, as they walked along Alki Beach, the waves lapping at the shore, Ezra thought of the trash bag. It no longer defined him. He was an artist, a brother, a son. Someone who'd faced rejection and chosen to build anyway. Elias slung an arm around him, their laughter mingling with the sound of the sea. "We did it easy," Elias said, his voice thick with emotion. "We made it through." Ezra nodded, the sunset painting their faces in gold. They were twin boys who came out together, one met with a hug, the other with a trash bag. But together, they'd found something stronger. A family built on love, resilience, and the courage to be themselves. As they stood there, the horizon stretching before them, Ezra knew the road ahead would have its challenges. But with Elias by his side, and a community that had become their home, he felt ready. They weren't just survivors. They were creators of their own story, one that would echo far beyond the pain of that rainy Seattle night.